Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. I am one of the exercise therapists here at the Cardiovascular Prevention and Rehabilitation Program with South Lake Regional Health Center. Today we're going to discuss exercise and cold weather. So we're going to look at how the body reacts to cold and winter conditions, identify what temperatures are safe for outdoor exercise, also discuss how to modify your exercise for the cold weather. We're going to touch on snow shoveling a little bit and then look at some different clothing options to help keep you comfortable in the cold. So how cold weather affects the body. Your body is going to redirect its blood flow to the core, so to help protect those organs that help our body function. And it's going to restrict the blood flow to your limbs. So it's going to narrow the blood vessels, so not as much blood flow is going to your arms and your legs. So if you recall, sometimes when you're outside, your fingers get a little cold, and that's because your blood flow is being redirected to your core to help avoid the decrease in core body temperature. Something you also could encounter when you are outside in the cold is something called cold-induced angina. And what this is cold air causes a reflex to constrict those coronary arteries. So when you breathe in that cold air, through your mouth, there's nerve endings at the back of your throat, and the cold air hits those nerve endings and causes this constriction of the coronary arteries, which then can cause this cold-induced angina. So also the additional load on the heart can cause these symptoms as well, just because of the cold, increasing that workload on the heart. But something we suggest doing is using a scarf or some sort of neck covering just to pull it up over your mouth and your nose. And that helps warm the air a little bit or filter the air a little bit before you breathe it in, so it can decrease the chances of those receptors at the back of your throat being stimulated and causing that constriction of the coronary arteries. So it's always a good idea just to have something over your mouth when you are going outside, and especially when you're exercising outside because you're breathing heavier, just to kind of warm the air a little bit, and it's going to decrease the chances of triggering any sort of cold-induced angina. When it comes to doing exercise outdoors in the winter, you want to be mindful of the temperature. So just like with hot weather, you need to be mindful of the temperature. Same thing with cold weather. So anything from 0 to -9, it is usually okay. When you're getting up to the -9, you could maybe start to decrease some of those outdoor activities and be more aware of any sort of adverse symptoms you could experience. When you want to completely avoid outdoor activities in the winter is if it's -10 or colder. So anything colder than -10, and that's including the wind chill, no outdoor activity is recommended. So be very mindful of that temperature, because you're putting a higher workload on the heart and you're at a higher risk of any sort of adverse symptoms occurring when you're doing that exercise outdoors. So always remember, -10, with the wind chill, you're going to move your exercise indoors. So just some tips with the cold weather. Again, -10 or colder, move your exercise indoors. Very helpful to extend your warm-up time. Because it is cold, it's going to take longer to get those muscles moving, get that blood flowing to those working muscles. So doing an extended warm-up is very helpful. Always remembering to watch for ice overhead and underfoot. So sometimes our pathways can be covered with snow, and then there's ice under that snow. So really important to keep that in mind. So something you can also look at for ice underfoot is those little grips. They just attach onto your shoe, and they have little spikes on the bottom, and it helps kind of grip onto ice if there is any ice. And then also overhead, so if you're walking in any sort of covered areas, looking for ice that could potentially fall. Checking the forecast is really important, especially if you're going for a longer exercise session. You want to make sure that it's not interrupted by any sort of poor winter weather. So we've all seen it. One minute it's bright and sunny, and then all of a sudden it's snowing like crazy. So just making sure you know the forecast, that it's going to be bright and sunny or nice for a long period of time or for the duration of your exercise. Making sure you stay hydrated, also really important. We still sweat when we are exercising in the cold, even though you might not notice it as much, so we can still become dehydrated. So making sure you're replacing those fluids and continuously drinking water to keep yourself hydrated. When it is starting to get colder, we're going to decrease the intensity of the exercise, so decreasing the pace and the duration, and making sure you wear proper clothing and layers. So in a few slides, we'll just touch on some of the different layers that we want to look at. And layers is really important because as you exercise, you might start to get warm, so you can take layers off. It's never nice to be shivering and cold and trying to warm yourself up by doing exercise. It's better to be warm and take layers off as you need to. So when it comes to snow shoveling, we do say no, it is not advised that you do snow shoveling after any sort of cardiovascular event or a TIA or stroke. Many reasons for that is it is very high intensity, especially with the heavy snow that we get. So it involves a lot of lifting and you're just at a much higher risk of an injury. Another concern with snow shoveling is we tend to not do any sort of warm up with that. We tend to just get bundled up and just go out and do it. And there's no warm up and no time to let your body adjust. Interesting fact is when there is a big heavy snowfall, there is a lot more heart attacks and issues that go into emerge. So please just try to have someone else do it for you, or again, seeing if there's any community resources out there, which we'll talk about next. But try to avoid snow shoveling in general because it is definitely not advised for a lot of people, especially people in our program. So some community resources out there are some free services for seniors put on by the town. We used to have a flyer for some of the local resources. So if you are looking for some help with snow shoveling, contact your exercise therapist and we can potentially find you some further information about that. There's also lots of companies out there that you can hire for snow removal. And the nice thing is they come, they do it, and it's just done. And depending on your property, it's not necessarily that expensive. Another thing you could potentially do is a student, or if you have a neighborhood kid that is looking for a little bit of extra money, they likely could do it for a lower cost for you. May not be as reliable as some of the companies that you hire, but it's still another option that you could look into. So again, if you are looking, if you don't have anyone else in your home that can shovel the snow for you, contact your exercise therapist and we can try to help you find some of those services that are available to seniors. Now we're going to look at some signs of hypothermia. So hypothermia is when your body temperature has dropped substantially and your body just isn't able to produce heat anymore. So some symptoms could be shivering, clumsiness, lack of coordination, confusion, difficulty speaking or thinking, some slurred speech, or even drowsiness. So what you would do if you're with somebody and you recognize those symptoms, or if you're recognizing them in yourself, you're going to try to move the person into a warm environment. You want to make sure we remove any sort of wet clothing and cover the person with blankets to try to get them warm and trying to increase their body temperature slowly. Also things like frostbite, what that is it's damage to the tissue from freezing due to the formation of ice crystals within the cell. And it causes the cell to rupture and then that cell is no longer living. And that's why it goes kind of black if it's the area like for example on your finger. So that's again really important to make sure you're covered properly and you're dressed in layers. So always keep in mind some of these signs of hypothermia and try to get that person into a warm environment and slowly bring up their body temperature. So to prevent hypothermia, it's going to be all about those layers. So you're going to have a base layer. So layer 1 is going to be that polyester, kind of like it's a man-made material, that exercise material. It's called Dry Fit or Cool Max, depending on what the brand is. So really something that's not cotton, that has wicking away properties. So it causes the moisture to be pulled away from your skin and to the outer layer of the clothing, and it removes that moisture. Then layer 2 is going to be something loosely woven like a wool or a synthetic wool. And then the next layer will be something tightly knit, a tightly knit wool, or this is where you could have your cotton, or again, a synthetic fiber like fleece, or like a tracksuit top. And then the top layer is going to be your wind and water resistant layer. So that's when you're going to have your jacket on. Also a reminder, if you are exercising at night, because now as the days get shorter, our nights get here quicker and it starts to get dark very quickly. So making sure you are well visible, bright clothing, reflective accents, things like that, just to make sure you're visible to drivers and others around you. So we have all our layers, and you want to make sure you don't forget the additional pieces like your scarf. So having your scarf to pull up over your mouth and nose to try to prevent that cold-induced angina. Having your mitts and your hat to cover those limbs, because if the blood flow is being reduced and it's going to be going more to your core, we need to make sure those hands and feet and head are covered. Making sure you have proper winter boots so you don't have snow getting into them, and something with good grips. And if you are going to be walking on sidewalks or something that could potentially have ice, you can get these little things that clip onto your shoes that have the little spikes that help grip on the ice. Not sure if you can see it in the PowerPoint at all, but the picture of shoes, I'm just seeing if I can move my mouse over right here. So the picture of the shoes, they have these little rubber things that slip on, and they have some metal and little spikes on them that help you grip the ice a little better. So you may be asking, what about other activities, other winter activities? Can I go snowshoeing, cross-country skiing? There's lots of different winter activities out there. So if you have anything specific or out of the ordinary, it's always best to speak with your exercise therapist first to find out if that is a safe activity to do. Something you always have to remember is that RPE scale, so the 6 to 20 scale. You want to exercise in the safe zone, which is about 11 to 14, so kind of in that somewhat hard but not really hard zone. And just go by how you feel. If you're starting to get aches and pains or any sort of chest discomfort or anything, then it may be too intense of an exercise or activity too soon. So always great to consult your exercise therapist first before getting into any of these activities. Or again, just go by how you feel. If you're getting any sort of tightness or any sort of aches and pains that you don't normally get, then it might be a little too soon to do that activity. If you have any questions, you can always send us an email to your exercise therapist directly, or you can send an email to our generic cardiac rehab email, which is cardiacrehab@southlakeregional.org, and that email is monitored every day, and we will respond to you as soon as possible. So hopefully you enjoyed this session, and hopefully you learned something about exercising in cold weather. And hopefully, again, soon enough, we will be talking about exercise in hot weather again. Thank you so much for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your day.